everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of I'm Batman, the podcast. A podcast where I, your host, Captain Marvelous, will be reviewing each and every episode of the 1992 classic Batman the Animated Series. Let me give you some background information on myself. I have done many podcasts in the past. I did the OTR wrestling podcast for about 4 years before I stopped doing that and moved on to my other current podcast, which is Saved by the Podcast, a podcast where we chronologically review each and every episode of Saved by the Bell, along with my co-host Omega Death. I have done many other podcasts as well. I've done That's So Raving, a podcast where I interviewed wrestling fans about their personal experiences with wrestling. I have done the show Off the Rails, where we talked about basically anything we wanted. And I have also co-hosted some other shows that weren't mine, like Smart Movie Fan and Smart Wrestling Fan and Smart Wrestling Fan Retro. So I do have some experience with podcasting. I just want you guys to know that. This show, it's kind of a personal project of mine. For those who do know me, and I guess those of you who don't are going to find out right now. I love painting, I love drawing, I love being creative and doing many things. And one of the things that inspired me, it completely changed my entire art style, was Batman the Animated Series. Before that series came along, I tried to do style work like Jim Lee and such. You know, famous comic book artists. I tried to copy that muscular, veiny, shadowy style. And once I got a glimpse of this cartoon, I heard of Batman the Animated Series on a Wizard magazine. For those of you who remember that, they had a preview. They had some character model sheets on the magazine article, which drove me nuts. As soon as I saw those, I got to it. I started just drawing them, copying that style, and it's a style that has stuck with me throughout the years. This cartoon has really influenced the way I do my work. I was about 11 years old, so just imagine, I was a Batman fan for years. This cartoon was coming, it got me really hyped. I was a big fan of the Michael Keaton movies, so this was something, to me, was like a dream cartoon, a dream come true, as well as a dream cartoon. Finally, Batman as a cartoon, it was something that was just amazing to me. This will be a project of love. I will review every episode. I will tell you what I like about them, as well as what I don't like about them. Because when you do like something, you're very critical of that. You're critical of the things that you love. So, without further ado, let's get to I'm Batman.
Wait till they get a load of me.
I'm going to give you some background information on this cartoon, Batman the Animated Series, before we get started on the episode review. This is the first episode. I'm not sure if all you listeners are familiar with the background of this cartoon, although I'm sure many of you are. When I do go over things like this, it's for new listeners, some who maybe didn't grow up with this. So some of you listeners are way younger than my old self, so Batman the Animated Series was something before your time that you've heard many old fogies like myself just talk and drool about. So let me give you some background information on this. This was a paper I actually wrote for my college animation class, so I'm going to read it to you. It does go into future spoilers of the series, but this is the first episode. By the time we get to, say, the first appearance of, like, Renee Montoya or something, we're not going to remember most of this, so... in the early 90s, Warner Brothers wanted to develop a weekly animated series based on one of their most popular franchises. When Eric Radomski and Bruce Timm finished the pilot, the series was picked up with great expectations. When the series made its debut, it changed the way people viewed cartoons forever. The series was Batman the Animated Series. The Batman series not only had a unique look to it, but it used some unique techniques in its animation. The Batman series changed the way people thought about cartoons, and it also changed the entire Batman mythology in ways no one imagined. Batman the Animated Series has a different look and feel from other cartoons at the time, borrowing elements from all other Batman incarnations before it. This Batman had a very dark look to it, while still keeping the action and fun elements intact. Producers Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski wanted the show to be serious and visually striking, a form of a mini-movie, if you will. They wanted the show to be driven by the character development and the compelling stories, not just random action scenes put together. They knew the look was very important. Inspired by the early Fleischer Brothers Superman cartoons, the design on the characters was kept simple and a bit blocky. Now, before I continue with this, some background on Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski. They are the creators of the look of this series. The characters, the blocky, simple-shaped characters that we've known the DC animated universe to take, are known as a Timmverse, after Bruce Timm, who created the look of the characters. He created the character design. But most importantly, I wanted to point this out. I noticed it's been kind of lost to history on who Eric Radomski is. He actually created the backgrounds of the show. He created the city of Gotham. He created Gotham City in this cartoon. He gave this show the look and feel. The characters are amazing. The characters are great. But the show itself, the whole dark noir, which is what they called this look, this whole feel to it, was Eric Radomski. I feel he's been lost to history. He doesn't get mentioned much. We get mention of Bruce Timm and mention of Paul Dini, who was a writer on the show, who did great adaptations of a lot of the classic stories. And I just wanted to give Eric Radomski his due. He doesn't seem to get much appreciated in the creation of this. Some background on these two: they were actually working on Tiny Toon Adventures. They were working on Tiny Toon Adventures when they were approached with this project. So, if you notice, there's a lot of small Tiny Toon Adventure Easter eggs throughout the series. And the little bit of spoiler alert: the next episode that we will review, second episode of I'm Batman the Podcast, there is a Tiny Toons Easter egg on there, so we're looking forward to that. Alright, continuing with this essay. The world Batman lived in was not made to look like any specific century or era in order to keep the show from looking outdated several years later. Instead, borrowing from Tim Burton's 1989 Batman film, the world was made to look very dark and gothic while still having a futuristic feel. The artist referred to his style as Dark Deco, so it was Dark Deco, not Dark Noir, as I mentioned. Writers from the Batman comic book were used for several episodes to give the show serious stories that use character development and plots with emotion and depth, to let you know that you weren't just watching a Saturday morning cartoon, quote unquote. The musical score was conducted by Shirley Walker. Shirley Walker conducted the orchestra for the Tim Burton Batman film. She brought a great atmosphere and provided the exact mood with her music, making it feel as if you were watching a movie, not just a cartoon. The voice casting was conducted in a different manner than usual. The producers didn't want a person who could do funny voices or just change the tone of their voice. They were looking for people who already had the personality within them and would just be able to let it out and record it. Great voice actors were cast for the show, such as Kevin Conroy, who has been the voice of Bruce Wayne and Batman from the beginning of the show to present day. He also voiced Batman in the Arkham series of video games, I believe, except for Arkham Origins. I believe that's the one he missed out on. I apologize. The voice of Bruce Wayne and Batman from the beginning of the show to the present day, and other shows such as the Justice League as well. Casting established actors such as Mark Hamill, who you might know as Luke Skywalker, as the Joker, Ron Perlman as Clayface, Richard Mole as Two-Face, and Paul Williams as the Penguin gave the show the edge over animated shows at the time. Guest stars were brought in as well, such as Adam West, who portrayed Batman in the 1960s live-action TV show. Now, I mentioned that they kept wanting this to not be a quote-unquote cartoon, making it sound like a bad thing, but those are their words, believe me. I love cartoons, and I don't think that should be used as a derogatory term, but that's just the way the creators felt. In this memorable episode, Adam West voiced the Grey Ghost, a television superhero to a young Bruce Wayne, who as an adult modeled his Batman persona after. This episode showed that the people behind the show respected those who made Batman what it is today. As Bruce Timm described it, we weren't trying to reinvent Batman. Instead, we were just building on what those before us did. Batman the Animated Series also used animation techniques not seen before or seen in years. Backgrounds were made on black paper, forcing the artist to paint using bright colors, giving the show a dark and moody feel. Several scenes were shot using just the still painting and animating only certain elements of it, a technique used in the Fleischer Brothers Superman cartoons. Now, the most notable of these is in the intro, when we first get our very first look of full Batman's face. You can tell it's a painting, and only his eyes are animated as they squint. Something that was noticeably different from other cartoons was the use of firearms. Characters from animated shows weren't allowed to use guns. They were only allowed to use things such as lasers and freezing rays. The producers convinced the network and the studio to allow the villains to carry and use firearms, the condition being that the gun could never be pointed directly at the camera. Those are some of the ways that Batman the Animated Series changed animation. Next, I will talk about how the animated series changed the Batman mythos in both film, comic books, and pop culture. Now, for this, it might get a bit spoilery. You might want to skip ahead, I would say about 5 minutes. I talk about the future of the series, about what how certain characters were changed, how it affected the comic book mythos as we know it today. So if you don't know that already, and you kind of just want to be surprised as I review the episode, you might want to skip ahead. If not, it's not something that I believe we don't know. As I said, I want to make it fresh for new listeners. I don't want to just assume you all know everything. I know that we know a lot about this series. Sometimes I'm still surprised to learn things about this series. So just bear with me on that. Don't lose patience and think I'm treating you all like little kids who don't know anything. I just want to make it a better listening experience for the new listeners. All right, let's continue with this. Batman, the animated series, not only changed the way people thought about cartoons, but it also changed the way fans of Batman thought about the entire franchise. The Batman series contributed in many different ways. Some of the things included the creation of characters such as Officer Renee Montoya, a tough female cop who had never appeared in the comic books until she was created for the animated series. On a personal note, I love Renee Montoya because she was a Hispanic cop, female Hispanic cop, which I feel it's something that's not represented very well on TV shows and cartoons. I myself am a Hispanic male, so whenever I see a Hispanic character that's not your typical Dora the Explorer stereotype, I'm really happy with that. And by that I mean that character that speaks in Spanish and then repeats every single thing he just said in English. I can't stand that. I've seen that on many shows. I just find it very annoying, and it just feels force-fed, and they're just doing it because they want to please a certain section of the audience. Another character that was created for the series was Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn made her debut in the episode titled Joker's Favor. She was meant to be only a henchwench, quote-unquote, for the Joker, but fans fell in love with her, and she soon was made into the Joker's girlfriend/sidekick, appearing in more episodes. Harley Quinn became so popular that she was given her own comic book series, started episodes by herself, and was given a backstory. Harley, whose real name is Harleen Quinzel, was the psychiatrist for the Joker. She ended up falling in love with him and helping him escape from Arkham Asylum, adopting a life of crime and losing her sanity. A Batman film was planned to follow the film Batman and Robin, in which director Joel Schumacher, for those of you who remember the Batman and Robin fiasco, director Joel Schumacher planned to include Harley Quinn as the main villain. She was planned to take revenge on Batman for killing the Joker in the first Batman film. Now this is what really gets me all the time. She was planned to be the Joker's daughter and not his lover. Now the rumor of who was to play her? Madonna. Madonna was rumored to have played Harley Quinn in that iteration of the movie. Other characters were reinvented to fit in with the dark motif of the show. The Mad Hatter was a character who for the most part was used as a joke. He was just a crazy criminal who looked like a Mad Hatter from the Lewis Carroll's Alice Adventures in Wonderland book, and he liked to steal hats. In the animated series, he was a scientist who was working on technology for mind control. He was lonely and sad. He fell in love with a co-worker named Alice. When he saw that he couldn't have her, he went mad and tried to take control of her life using his mind control technology. The character of Clayface, a living blob of clay who could morph into any object or person he wanted, has had many, many incarnations in the comic books, but the animated series managed to incorporate all of them and make their Clayface the version most people think about when they think of the character. Mr. Freeze is perhaps the character who has benefited the most from his makeover. Mr. Freeze was just another criminal with a gimmick for Batman to fight. He had a gun that could freeze things and committed crimes for no reason other than greed. In the animated series, he was a tragic figure, a scientist who had cryogenically frozen his wife to stop her from dying from a strange disease. Victor Freeze was interrupted by a greedy company executive and dumped into some of his chemicals, turning him into Mr. Freeze. Freeze then set off to get revenge on the executive to avenge his wife. This story was told with such emotion that it made you want to cheer for Mr. Freeze to win rather than Batman to defeat him. This episode solidified Mr. Freeze's place in the Batman legend as one of the most popular villains in the Rogues Gallery. Mr. Freeze had been killed off in the comic books, but this episode of the show made him so popular that DC Comics brought him back to life with no explanation to his resurrection and gave him the origin from the animated series. This origin was also used in the film Batman and Robin, where Mr. Freeze was portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Existing popular villains such as the Joker and Two-Face were also given more depth to their personalities. The character of the Joker throughout the years had deteriorated into a harmless clown, a criminal who was more obsessed with being the funniest villain in Gotham City than being any real threat. In the 1980s, the character was being brought back to his roots as an actual killer who was just plain insane. The Joker from the animated series cemented the character's status as a seriously insane and disturbed psychopath. From his obsession of playing games with Batman, killing people with his Joker gas for no reason other than he thinks it's funny, to his abusive relationship with Harley Quinn. The Joker was never played just for laughs and silliness. The character of Two-Face is based on the novel of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a character who is a constant battle with his good side and evil side. In the comic books, Two-Face was in a constant war with himself to maintain his sanity. He was obsessed with the number 2, but was never giving any real reason why, and decided to fate of people's lives with a flip of his two-headed coin. In Batman the Animated Series, he wasn't just someone battling inner demons or just plain crazy. He was battling a split personality that was evil and was taking over his life. The character of Joker and Two-Face have changed in the comic books, movies, and almost all of their incarnations to fit the personality and depth received from the animated series. Batman the Animated Series proved that a cartoon that is made with precision and care can change not only the medium of animation, but the way people think and perceive other aspects of art. That is the end of my essay, and pretty much gave you a lot of the background info you needed to know on this show. So, before we actually get to the first aired episode, I'm going to talk about a few things here. There was an animation reel that was used to pitch the Batman show to the network. Like as I said, Eric Radomski and Bruce Timm were approached with this idea. They created this cartoon, and they showed it to the executives so that they could get a feel of what they wanted to create. Now, the animation reel, it's actually a bonus on the complete collection DVDs. If you have those, if you have the animated series DVDs, I believe it's in disc 1. You can go to extras and you can see the original animation reel, which is actually just a extended scene of the introduction for the Batman animated series. It looks a bit weird. It feels brighter and more rubbery, if you will. The characters still have that same feel, that same look of the simpleness, the square jaws, the simple shapes and designs, but they just feel a bit more flexible. Like when Batman throws a punch, his arms just feel like they go more rubbery, and it doesn't have quite that impact as they managed to put into the finished product. There's a part when we get, as I spoke about earlier, the close-up of Batman's face with the painted background with only the eyes animated. We get that scene in this animation reel. I find it hilarious because Batman's face is overly detailed. It's just hilariously detailed. I'm sure, I don't know if all of you have seen episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants. They use this same trick on scenes. That's when they want to show SpongeBob being really cute. So they have this painting of SpongeBob instead of the usual animation. And he has the big, puffy, exaggerated, rosy cheeks. And his 2 buck teeth are coming out. And his eyes are really huge with eyelashes batting. And it just looks overly exaggerated and cute. That's actually what Batman reminds me of here. He has really high, detailed cheekbones. He has the chin with the little cleft in it, and it's so shadowy and detailed. It makes it look like an overly exaggerated, cute version of him, and I just find that hilarious. On the air dates of this show, one more thing before we get to the actual review of the episode I'm doing today. The air dates here are a bit weird. The episode we're doing today is called The Cat and the Claw. Now, this is a two-part episode, although the title screen doesn't let you know that. The title screen just says The Cat and the Claw. It doesn't say part 1 or anything. This was aired on September 5th, 1992, which was a Friday. Now, this episode was the first episode aired. Main reason being is that around this time, Batman Returns was out in theaters, or was about to come out in theaters, and it was just it was really popular. I believe it was already out, and it was a really popular movie. So they wanted to tie the cartoon in with the movie. So they wanted an episode featuring Catwoman, who was the breakout character of that film. Now, this episode is pretty much stars Catwoman. So the pilot episode, which is what was supposed to be the first one aired, which is the episode On Leather Wings, actually aired the next day on Saturday morning. Right the next day on Saturday morning. So we had a Friday episode, then we had the Saturday episode. The Saturday episode was actually just a preview. It wasn't scheduled to air on that date. That's what I'm trying to say here. So it's just really weird the way these episodes aired. The other weird thing about this is that The Cat in the Claw, as I mentioned, it's a two-part episode. The Cat in the Claw Part 1 aired on September 5th. The Cat in the Claw Part 2 didn't actually air until September 12th. So we actually had 8 episodes in between the two-parters, if you can believe that. For the first few weeks, Batman aired consecutively. I believe they actually had they were really promoting this thing. So I believe we had an episode air on a Friday. We had an episode air that Saturday. And they ran the whole week. And we had to wait an entire week to catch part 2 of The Cat in the Claw. So I just find that whole beginning air dates a bit muffled, but after that it should get back into its original schedule. And I don't believe we have any other parts after that go part 1 and then wait a week for part 2. So why don't we get to it?